The Beatles were good to their fans, especially on holidays, where they would send free Christmas-themed records to members in their official British fan club. Today, we have a very special holiday episode where we're going to show you 10 very cheerful holiday facts about the Beatles. Happy Crimble. In October 1963, the Beatles' press officer Tony Barrow suggested that the band record a simple Christmas greeting to their rapidly growing fan club. They were quite busy to begin gearing up to record I Want to Hold Your Hand, which would end up being a smash hit, so Tony Barrow was in charge of creating their Christmas script. The band gathered round a microphone to sing a hilariously incorrect version of Good King Wenceslas.
Good King Wenceslas looked out on the feast of Stephen.
And immediately John begins to go off script in comedic Beatles fashion.
In the meantime, Gary Crimble to you, Gary Mimble to you, Gary Babel, dear Christmas, happy birthday, me too.
And of course proceeds to bark, possibly a precursor to Hey Bulldog.
Just before I pass you over to Paul.
That's a joke. Sadly, the Beatles made a mistake of telling fans they enjoyed the candy Jelly Babies in a recent interview, and their fan mail was inundated with tons of them. Paul took this record as an opportunity to say, "We've gone right off Jelly Babies." After more jokes and songs like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Ringo, Paul makes a surprisingly honest statement, saying, "Lots of people ask us what we enjoy best, concerts and television or recording. What we like to hear most is one of our songs taking shape in a recording studio." 30,000 copies were pressed on flexi vinyls and were sent to fan club members in the first week of December. The band was actually excited to make a sequel to their first Christmas record, practically begging Tony Barrow for a new script. Tony says, "It was the boys themselves who promoted me into continuing the tradition. When are we doing this year's Crimble record? They asked me. They also wanted another script. I knew they needed my words simply as a security measure in case they dried up, in the event that they made everything I wrote much funnier by their distinctively zany, goon-style presentation." However, the Beatles were notably a bit less jovial in this recording because they had spent a whopping 12-hour day recording songs for their upcoming Beatles for Sale album. It also didn't help that the script had barely legible handwriting, but of course the boys turned that into a gag, saying,
"Oh, we hope you've enjoyed listening to the records as much as we've enjoyed melting them." No, that's wrong. Making them.
With Rubber Soul marking a stark shift in not just the Beatles' music, but their use of fame, the lads decided to reference the ongoing Vietnam conflict on what should have been a rather straightforward reading for their Christmas record in 1965. John, to Brian Epstein's dismay, decided to make a brief parody of Barry Maguire's End of Times anthem, Eve of Destruction.
China down in Vietnam and China and too, and look at all those bodies. Jordan floating in the river Jordan.
The Beatles had been apart for the first time in 4 years after they officially stopped touring due to the chaos of Beatlemania. After a much-needed hiatus, the band was back together in much better spirits, and you can hear that from their voices on the fourth Christmas album, Pantomime Everywhere It's Christmas. This was an actually full-blown production with sound effects, music, and narrative. Recorded on November 25th, a day after an early take of John Strawberry Fields Forever, the Beatles thought it was time to take a different approach with this holiday release. This Christmas special featured the Beatles performing a nearly 7-minute auditory spectacle with fleshed-out characters and that old Beatles charm. Mainly driven by Paul, he even drew the cover art for the album sleeve. This record, although just a holiday release, is considered a remarkable glimpse into what the Beatles had in store for us. Now, this was a Beatles Christmas record, mainly for the fact that it actually had a well-done song. Christmas Time Is Here Again expands on previous holiday iterations by actually giving us a Christmas song. Belting vocals and swelling harmonies, interestingly counted in.
It's a Bandsy remix, page 444.
The Beatles charmed us once more with an actually Beatlesy Christmas tune. They donned the new band name The Revellers, who were on a quest to audition for the BBC. This would be the last Christmas record they ever recorded all together. They weren't broken up yet, and although all the pieces to this one were recorded separately and given to their friend Kenny Everett at BBC Radio 1, they were still very much the Beatles, if not a little bit on their way to breaking up. But they were busy Beatles at the time. George was away in the States with Bob Dylan, Paul was courting Linda Eastman, whom he had to fly from his Scotland farm to New York just to see, Ringo was in the middle of a move with his family, and John had just had a marijuana bust. But it didn't stop them from making a pretty awesome record, most notably Ringo's fantastic one-man skit where he portrayed himself and an insane harpy shrieking down a telephone line, and George Harrison introducing the incredible Tiny Tim and his absolutely wonderful cover of Nowhere Man. If you haven't heard it yet, it's a treat. Just remember, Tiny Tim has a peculiar type of singing style, but I love it. It's 1969, you know what that means. Tensions were never higher and the band was pretty much done. Not officially, but they had it with each other. Keeping the breakup a secret for a slew of reasons. You can watch the Beatles breakup episode by following a link in the description below. They decided to maintain a sense of normalcy and recorded their final Christmas record. They recorded their pieces at their respective homes. John walked with Yoko around their mansion, singing deep and crisp and even. Harking back to their very first Christmas record, Paul performs his original This Is to Wish You, a delicately haunting song. Ringo sang an ad-libbed song and plugged his new film, The Magic Christian, and George couldn't really be bothered, so he just utters a single line. It was the end, and incidentally, ended with the music from their song, The End. John Lennon, about a year after the Beatles' breakup, releases one of the most timeless Christmas songs ever, echoing his 1969 peace campaign, Happy Xmas. It reached number 4 in the UK in 1971. John says, Happy Xmas Yoko and I wrote together. It says, war is over if you want it. It was still the same message, the idea that we're just as responsible as the man who pushes the button. As long as people imagine that somebody's doing it to them and that they have no control, then they have no control. Not to be outdone, the other lads all had their fair share of holiday releases. In 1974, George reunites with Ringo to create the song Ding Dong Ding Dong, which was inspired by a theme that George found engraved on the wall at his Friar Park estate, reading, Ring out the old, ring in the new, and for the music video even having him don that Sgt. Pepper uniform for the first time since 1967. In 1979, Paul released Wonderful Christmas Time, which he had actually made around the McCartney 2 album era. Although critically, and even to some fans, the song can be divisive, yet it doesn't hurt that he makes $500,000 a year in royalties on it. And of course, we can't forget Ringo's 1999 entire Christmas album, I Wanna Be Santa Claus. Not only did Ringo make a full-length seasonal album, but he was joined by none other than musical genius and ELO creator Jeff Lynne to complete a few tracks. Sadly, Ringo's album didn't do so well, but he blames that on improper marketing. But if you're in the mood for a Beatles Christmas spectacular, here's a few of my favorites you should listen to straight away. Thanks so much for watching, and happy Hanukkah and Christmas and Crimble to you all. I hope you have an absolutely awesome holiday. This year, my first album has done so well, and I owe it to all of you guys who took the time to check it out. I can't thank you enough, honestly. If you haven't heard it yet, just search the HollyHobs in Apple Music or Spotify or anywhere music is streamed. And as always, a big thank you to contributing author Leah Robbins. See you next time.